Today, we are looking at a really unconventional forecast. It's a single astrological analysis that claims to map out potential national security risks for Iran. But here's the thing. It focuses on one very specific slice of time, the month of February 2026.
سلام به ترند مگازین خوش آمدید.
جایی که اخبار را قبل از وقوع به شما اعلام می‌کند.
Okay, let's dive right in. In this explainer, we're going to neutrally break down this one specific astrological analysis. Now, just to be super clear, our goal here isn't to say this is right or wrong. Not at all. We're simply going to unpack it, see how the forecast was put together, and understand exactly what it's claiming might happen. So before we can even get to the calendar of events, we've got to get a handle on the basic ideas this whole thing is built on. You know, what's in the toolbox? What are the core concepts the astrologer is using to make these kinds of predictions? Well, the entire framework for this is something called Mundane Astrology. Now, this isn't your daily horoscope you read for fun. Forget that. This branch of astrology looks at the big picture. It applies its principles to entire countries, to global politics, to major world events. And here are the main players in this story, at least according to the analysis. Think of them as the cast of characters. You've got Mars, the classic symbol of aggression and military tension. Then there's Uranus, which brings the shocks, the totally unexpected events. Pluto represents these huge, deep, transformative conflicts. Saturn is all about pressure on existing structures. Neptune is the wild card. It brings deception and confusion. And finally, you have Jupiter, which basically acts like a giant magnifying glass, making any crisis feel that much bigger. All right, now that we know the players, let's get into the timeline. The forecast breaks the month down into a few distinct high-risk periods, and it all kicks off right at the top of February. The first window they flag is February 3rd to the 5th. The reason? The source says Mars, the planet of aggression, is in opposition to a key point in Iran's national chart called the MC. Just think of the MC as representing the nation's government and public standing. So having Mars staring it down is seen as a major spike in pressure, both from the outside and from within. Now, for each of these periods, the analysis lays out two possible paths, kind of like a fork in the road. The negative scenario suggests a military crisis or serious tension at the borders. But the positive scenario says that same exact energy could be channeled into something constructive, like heightened defensive awareness and smart diplomacy that actually de-escalates the whole thing. Next up, from February 8th to the 11th, the spotlight shifts over to Uranus, the planet of surprises. It's described as getting close to a key angle. In plain English, that's like a planet moving into a position where its influence suddenly gets a lot stronger, signaling that something unpredictable is on the horizon. And once again, we see two very different possibilities. The negative path points to a surprise attack or some kind of security incident that nobody saw coming. The positive path, though, completely flips that energy, turning it into a sudden diplomatic breakthrough, an unexpected agreement that stops a conflict before it can even start. As we hit the middle of the month, February 12th to the 14th, the dynamic changes. Now it's about Pluto, the force of transformation, putting pressure on Saturn, the symbol of structure. The source interprets this as a time of intense, grinding stress on the very foundations of the nation's security and stability. So it all comes down to how that pressure is handled. The negative outcome is that things crack, leading to a prolonged crisis and maybe even direct conflict. But the positive scenario suggests that very same pressure could force a major, necessary change, a complete rethink of foreign policy that actually reduces tension. So let's jump to the second half of the month and see how this forecast continues to build. There are three more critical periods identified before February is over. From the 17th to the 20th, Mars is back in the spotlight, but this time it's all about its location. It's moving through what's called the 8th astrological house, a part of the chart this analysis directly links to crisis, war, and damage. So having the planet of aggression hanging out in that particular zone is seen as a pretty direct indicator of heightened conflict risk. And the potential outcomes reflect that direct energy. The negative path is pretty straightforward, direct military engagement. The positive one, however, is a successful defensive action, a firm response that contains the threat and stops it from escalating any further. Now, this is where things could get amplified. From the 23rd to the 26th, Jupiter, the planet of expansion, is said to be energizing Uranus, the planet of shock. The interpretation here is that any sudden, unexpected event, could get blown way out of proportion, becoming much, much larger than anyone initially expected. And this really shows you the stakes. The negative scenario is a crisis that spins out of control and has major consequences for the entire region. The positive outcome, then, has to be just as big: a major international agreement or some huge announcement that steps in and successfully calms the whole situation down. The final period highlighted takes us right to the end of the month. The key player here is Neptune, the planet of illusion and deception. This is flagged as a time where misinformation, cyber attacks, or even just a simple strategic miscalculation could be the biggest threat. And yep, good catch. February 2026 only has 28 days. So the final set of scenarios is all about information. The negative outcome is reacting to bad intel, war rumors, a false flag operation, and making a dangerous mistake. The positive outcome is seeing through that fog of war, being highly aware of false information, and avoiding any major strategic blunders. So, after walking through the month step by step, let's just pull back for a second and look at the entire picture that this one astrological analysis has laid out. This table really lays it all out. You can see the flow of the narrative here, from that initial tension of Mars to the sudden shock of Uranus, then that grinding pressure from Pluto and Saturn, and finally, the risk of deception from Neptune at the end. According to the source, each one of these risk periods is tied to a very specific planetary interaction. And all of this brings us to a final, really interesting question. When we're faced with a detailed timeline of potential future events like this one, no matter what the source is, how should we process it? Is it a useful forecast that can help with preparation, or is it just a source of fear? What is the responsible way to think about warnings about the future?